till I get up. Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go. On we'll go.
So what exactly is Venom Gyre? So Venom Gyre is one of the newer projectile chaos skills. So it's an attack projectile chaos skill. That means it doesn't count as a melee hit, so you can't use it to fortify, unfortunately. So if we read the skill description, it says fires a returning projectile that can be caught. Caught projectiles spiral outwards when you're whirling blades and do not return. So basically, you're firing out these projectiles, you catch it, and then once you catch it, you can use whirling blades, and it shoots out the projectiles. Now, the shooting out projectiles portion can shotgun. Not exactly sure how many can shotgun at a time. It really depends on where you start your animation from and how big the boss is. So the bigger the boss is, the more it will shotgun. So you can shoot up to 30 projectiles at once. Now, its quality is poison duration. We will decide to use Divergent Venom Gyre, and it gives us +1 chain. And you can see the base damage is not too bad. 165% puts it around Frostblade's level. It's not exactly Spectral Helix at 240% or 250%. It's not like Lightning Strike, which is also at 250%. So it's kind of modest. It's not the best in the world, right? But on the bright side, it's not the worst in the world, right? It's not like Spectral Throw, which is 130%. And it also has a returning component, so it is better than you might expect. Now, the base duration is 12 seconds, and this is how long the projectiles last. So you could hold up to 30 projectiles for up to 12 seconds before it disappears. And you can catch up to 30 returning projectiles. The skill has built-in conversion. It converts 60% of the fizz damage to chaos damage. It has a 40% chance to poison on hit. What this means is that you could potentially play this at an earlier point in the league start with some sort of poison stacking. Returning projectiles deal 75% less damage. What this means is that the skill wouldn't be like having a 300% damage effectiveness. It's probably around 200% or so once you factor in the returning projectiles. So it's pretty good. Not like the craziest damage effectiveness skill, but it's definitely not too shabby. And then it has 40% chance to keep caught projectiles when firing them by using Whirling Blades. So when you use Whirling Blades, if you have 30, then you have a 40% chance, so you will keep 40% of the projectiles. And there's also a Helm enchant that boosts this up to 65%. So this allows you to Whirling Blades multiple times and be able to shotgun the boss multiple times per every 30 projectiles that you catch. And then the returning projectiles pierce all targets, and the projectiles return to you. So when you throw it out, it does not pierce, and it can chain, it can split with Sniper's Mark, it can fork, and it can also pierce if you run pierce on your build. But when it returns, it pierces all the targets, so it will come back to you. So the skill is pretty complicated, right? This is probably one of the only skills in PoE that has a double portion to it, right? And it's also conditional to another skill, which is Whirling Blades. So this is what makes the skill so fun. It's definitely a real game changer in skill design. I'm actually surprised I haven't really heard about it. I think it's just a lack of me playing. I just don't really like poison builds. Now, the way we're going to build this character is not going to be poison based. It's going to be on hit based. And you can also potentially do it with Trinity. So let's talk about some of the skill functions and interactions. So Pierce, right? So there is an order of operations in PoE that has to work before you get what's it called. So like if you have a split, a pierce, a fork, and chain, it will happen sequentially in order. So for pierce, primary projectiles can pierce, allowing a single target to be struck by both the outgoing and returning projectiles. Does not generate additional returning projectiles. So the whole point of this skill is to generate as many returning projectiles as possible, so you can use whirling blades as much as possible. So Pierce doesn't generate any because it just pierces the enemy and it comes back. Fork generates double the amount of projectiles, right? So every one additional fork you have, you would generate one projectile extra. So forking projectiles do not return, but the final projectiles return as expected. So you shoot out one projectile, it forks once, so it becomes two, and then you'll get two that will return to you. So this is incredibly good for clearing packs and generating more projectiles. Now, chain is the same thing, so it depends on how many times it chains, so the original one won't come back. So both fork and chain will generate a lot more ammunition or projectiles for you to launch with whirling blades. Now here, it says it launches caught returning projectiles in a spiraling fashion. When used, the projectiles are released very quickly but sequentially. Appears to home in on enemies slightly with roughly 1 of 6 blades striking the same enemy. Now, this is not really like confirmed, so it's really hard to know exactly how many blades out of 30 will hit the boss. So that's why the skill is pretty hard to calculate on DPS, and that's why it doesn't look so impressive on what's it called? On the POB. So point blank and fire shot take total travel distance into account. Projectiles released by whirling blades are now considered new projectiles. So that means all of the new projectiles can shotgun, and it also gets benefited with point blank if you do whirling blades on top of the enemy. And yeah, that's pretty much the main thing. It does recommend that people build it with poison, but however, we're going to be on hit base for this build. And if you see the enchants, the best enchant is Venom Gyre, has a 25% chance to keep caught projectiles fired by using whirling blades. And now let me show you in the game what the skill actually looks like. So right now is the Venom Gyre character. So Venom Gyre, you see we throw out the projectiles and it gets 7 projectiles back for every single time we attack. Now the reason being is that we are firing 7 projectiles out with Venom Gyre, and this is because we have 2 projectiles from Deadeye Ascendancy and 1 each from Phantom Blade. So we're running 1, 2, 3, 4 Phantom Blades, right? So this is how we get 6 total projectiles. Now, or 7 total projectiles. So here, you get 7, 14, 21. So now, when we use whirling blades, and you can see there's a timer for how long it lasts. When you use whirling blades, it will shoot all of these projectiles out. So if you activate this on top of a boss, you could potentially shotgun it with a large majority of the projectile. And if you're firing them out, you can whirling blades around and you'll catch them, the ones that come out, and you can do it multiple times. And you can, so pretty much whole gameplay loop is you shoot it out, and then once you're at the boss, you go whirling blades multiple times, and you can name lock the boss, and it will force you to go back and forth between the boss as optimally as possible, and shotgun it with as many projectiles as possible. So that's how you play Venom Gyre. It's pretty interesting to understand, or interesting to do and try to optimize it, because you do want to have this play style where you're throwing it out, and then you have the burst phase where you're whirling blades back and forth and releasing all of the projectiles into the boss. Now, for Withering Step, we're using Withering Step as it's a chaos on hit build. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the ascendancies that you would be choosing for this build and what is actually the best one. Now, this is the POB for the Venom Gyre build. It's not super optimized yet, so I'm just going to put it down in the description below. But there's definitely better, a better ascendancy in my opinion. So for this ascendancy, when I first saw the video, the person was using Deadeye, and I do not think that Deadeye is the best, best ascendancy. Ricochet or whatever it's called is pretty good. So it can chain on terrain, so if the boss is next to a wall or something, you could get a lot more projectiles that way, which is not something to underestimate. Endless Munitions is 2 projectiles, and then you get Tailwind, 150% effective Tailwind, which is really strong. So it gives you around like 12% action speed on top. And then you have the 75% increased effect of your marks. Now, overall, Deadeye is a super good ascendancy, but I think if you're going super late game, you want to be a Scion. Scion, you get Deadeye, which gives you 25% increased effective marks. You also get Tailwind. You also get skills fired additional projectiles, and you also get projectiles gain up to 50% damage as it travels farther. This pretty much negates a lot of the point blank shenanigans. But most importantly, you get Berserker, which gives you 15% more damage, and it gives you Rage Generation. Rage Generation is huge, especially for a build that has a lot of burst potential. You want to always be berserking with 50 rage, and that's why I believe that Scion is a lot better. You also get 40 strength. This is a strength stacking archetype that I'm currently working on. And you also get a lot of passive points, and for any attribute stacking build, strength or what's it called? Passive points are pretty much some of the best value skill points, or they're just incredibly efficient for you what you get, especially for attribute stacking build, because you can see how limited the build is by what's it called, by travel nodes. Now, a lot of people might be wondering what exactly is this build's defenses, and the build is pretty defensive. It has 100% spell suppression, it has 70% block, and you can get this a little higher. And if you take off Iron Reflexes that you don't really need since you already have 90% physical damage reduction, the build is kind of honestly a defensive powerhouse, right? So, or not like super defensive powerhouse, but it's pretty tanky. It's not exactly the squishiest build in the world, and this is because of layered defenses with block, max spell suppression, and also evasion. And it also has a decent chunk of armor, and it also uses what, cast when damage taken, molten shell. Or does this person even use cast when damage taken, molten shell? Well, some people use cast when damage taken, molten shell, other people don't, right? So this person's profile that I use is not really super optimized, and this is something I got from Nepal. But basically, if you take a look at it, you put in like cast when damage taken, molten shell, or molten shell, not molten strike, you will see that the defenses are a lot better, right? So it's untake. So with the molten shell, it should be a lot better. Well, actually, I'm not sure where did he put the molten shell, but basically, regardless, this build is very resilient, and it can do wave 30 simulacrum. Now, the point of like doing these guides like this is not really going to be a guide. This is more of a build overview. So I'm going to try to do these videos in like multiple parts, as I'm still learning to build myself. So this is more of like trying to help you understand how you can build the character, right? So this character for building is based off on hit damage. Now, there's multiple ways you can build it. As you can see, the MVP of the skill is mostly the Venom Gyre mechanics being super fun to play, and it also having a lot higher damage than it showcases in Pod, right? So you have the outgoing projectiles at 17.2 mil, and then you have the returning projectiles at 4.2 mil. And you can probably put like Wither as like 13 stacks, because if you can see here, if you run Enhance on the Wither at level 4, you inflict 13 Wither debuffs, right? So the damage output is definitely there, 30 mil DPS total. And then you don't account for how when you Whirling Blades, you'll be going back and forth between the target, and you'll be shooting out like potentially like 5 of these targets connecting, and it could be up to like 100 million bursts, right? And that's how you see in those videos why the damage looks so absurd at the beginning portion of the highlight. So like that's why this skill has potential. The number is higher than it shows on POB, and I hope you understand why now. And this is just one way of building it. You could potentially do Lightning Strike, or not Lightning Strike, like the Trinity Lightning Strike build with elemental scaling. You could also do Hoa with stacking, but I do think the most cost efficient way, now this build is not exactly the cheapest build in the world, is using is using strength stacking or replica Alberon's Warpath. So the way that this build works is that you actually get chaos damage per 80 strength, and you just end up stacking a lot of strength. So you have strength here on his chest, and then you have Crown of Eyes with Iron Will, which is on the tree now. So this makes strength bonus damage applied to spell damage. So you get a bunch of spell damage from that, and it just ends up being a pretty synergistic build. You can see here most of the items are not overly expensive. By far the most expensive piece is the replica Alberon's Warpath, which I think is around 20x, and usually 8 Exalt at League Start. And then you have Eyes of the Great Wolf, and then it's just some percent attributes and multi. And yeah, everything is not too crazy, and this is a claw. You use some spell damage, and I will be making a more detailed guide about how to get these pieces of gear and what to look for in them. Basically, just your average strength stacker, a lot of life and strength, and I will be putting down the POB in the description down below. But and then spell suppression, right? So you can theoretically get spell suppression on this and this piece over here. So 100% spell suppression build, and Venom Gyre, definitely, I think, a contender for a top meta build if people just play it more. And the sky's the limit. If they actually release an MTX for this build, I truly believe that Venom Gyre could become one of the most played abilities. It is incredibly fun. I think it is incredibly underrated. If you go on PoE Ninja, look at the number of people playing Venom Gyre. Let's go look at Scourge. I think there's like, what, 0% people playing Venom Gyre. Yeah, right. This guy's probably doing some, I don't even know what this is. It's a strength stacking build, right? So people do notice that strength stacking seems to be okay. And let's see, is there anyone playing Venom Gyre in hardcore Scourge? Oh, there's actually one person, 1k damage. Yeah, he doesn't even have a weapon. So how about self-found Scourge? Venom Gyre? Oh, there's 3 people. This guy's playing, I don't even know what this is. I mean, this is like a poison variant, right? So with a skill that's this good, like, you can see the potential. It also scales extremely, extremely well because of it. It honestly is not that great at the start. The ability has no flat damage to it, so you kind of need like a weapon, or you need some sort of flat damage from other sources. So like, if you think about a skill like Poisonous Concoction, which has like 1000 plus flat chaos damage from your potion, then you can see why skills like this requires a lot more gear to get off the ground, right? Compared to some, if you just level as Poisonous Concoction. Now, in terms of leveling, you can always level this as, you can always League Start as Poisonous Concoction and switch over to this pretty fast, right? So if you look at this, probably there's like 10 people playing Venom Gyre total in Scourge League. And it's just kind of a shame, right? I do think that this ability is a lot better than people give it credit for. I do think on hit is the way to go. Scion is probably the best Ascendancy. In the next videos, I'll flesh it out. I'll try to finish off the character and make a good POB. I will be linking a preliminary POB. And I hope people try out this build, because I do think Venom Gyre could be a meta contender if it was more popular. And if it got a Celestial MTX, this skill will be the #1 skill. Maybe not, but I'm just trolling, but not really trolling. This build is the most fun I've ever had playing PoE, and that's quite a statement to make. It's like Spectral Throw, EK, and Flicker Strike combined into one, so give it a try, everyone. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more Mirrors, Exalts, and Mage Bloods than me, and see you next time. Bye!